Hi everyone, Ravi this side. Welcome to EnggAdda. So today I'm going to discuss the topic what is Docker and what all the terms are there in the Docker. We'll discuss everything. Why we are using Docker. So we'll discuss each aspect of the Docker. So let me go to the next slide. So first of all, what is Docker? So Docker is a set of platform as a service product. So what do you mean by the platform as a service? So platform as a service is a form of cloud computing where an application software platform is provided by third party. So it is a platform that is provided by the third party on which the developer and the programmer can run their application or create their application how they are doing locally, how they are doing on the real machine. So that is what the Docker is. It is providing the platform as a service. So Docker uses the operating system level visualization to deliver software in the packages called containers. What is container? So container is nothing but it's a running instance of the Docker image. I will tell you what is Docker image, how we can create it. So containers are isolated from one another and bundles their own software libraries in the configuration files. So each containers are independent and they are bundled with their libraries and their requirements. They can communicate with each other through the well-defined channels. There are couple of network through which the Docker containers can communicate. There is a link through which the Docker containers can communicate. Okay, all the containers are run by a single operating system kernel and therefore uses fewer resources than the virtual machine. So earlier in the virtual machine, we were having multiple machines, multiple operating systems on the single machine. But this is not the case of the Docker. In the Docker, we have only one operating system. On top of that, we have multiple containers. So it is light in the size, and the virtual machines were heavy in the size. So let me go to the next slide and then explain you what is Docker architecture. So coming to the Docker architecture, we have these three parts. One is the client, one is the host, and another is the registry. So coming to the client is nothing but it's a command line interface through which we can run some commands and communicate with the Docker host, which is Docker daemon. What is Docker daemon? So Docker daemon is nothing but it's a server where we can create our images and containers and we can run those containers there. What is Docker hub? Docker hub is nothing but it's a repository where we can push our Docker images. Okay, now coming to the next slide, why we are using Docker. So a dependency version mismatch from one environment to another. So let's say when we are not using Docker and how generally we do the development. So let's say we have a few development environments, dev, QA, and production. So there can be a dependency mismatch between the QA and the dev so that both codes won't run. So why Docker? So there are a couple of problems that we were facing in the earlier development methodology that we were following when we were not using the Docker. So let's say we have multiple development environments like QA and production and dev environments. So let's say we have three different environments and we are using let's say Spring Boot version 3.1 in the dev environment, but we are using 2.7 in the QA environment and using 2.5 in the production environment. So whatever code we are running on the development will not, whenever we are going to push that to the QA, will not run because there is a dependency mismatch. Okay, so that is why the Docker is solving that problem. I will tell you how. Okay, let's say software upgrade. Okay, so let's say we are using Java 17 on the dev and in the production we have Java 8. So we need to, the code that is running on the dev will not run on the production because there is a software is not upgraded in the production. Similarly, library corrupted, let's say the jar, whenever we are going to deploy the development jar to the production and the jar is corrupted, then that will not run. So everything is solved by the Docker. How? We will tell you in the next slide. So let me go next. Okay. So first of all, just let me tell you what is the difference between the Docker containers and the virtual machine. So Docker containers contains binaries, libraries, and configuration files along with the application itself. But this is not the case of virtual machine. Okay, so in the virtual machine, we have multiple virtual machines to run on the single machines along with their own operating system. But this is not the case of the Docker. Docker has only one operating system. Okay. Now coming to the Docker, they don't contains a guest operating system for each container and rely on the underlying OS kernel which makes the container lightweight. So because there is only one operating system, so the container is very lightweight. Containers are very lightweight and there is only one operating system. But this is not the case of virtual machine. Each virtual machine has its own copy of the operating system along with the application and the necessary binaries, which make it significantly larger and requires more resources. Okay. Now containers share their resource with other containers in the same host operating system and provide operating system level process isolation. So because we have only one operating system and so many containers are running on the same operating system, they can communicate with each other. So it is a operating system level process isolation, but this is not the case of the virtual machine. In the virtual machine, they provide hardware level process isolation and it is slow to reboot. So coming to the conclusion, I just want to draw a conclusion that the Docker containers are lightweight because there is only having one operating system, but this is not the case of the virtual machine. We have multiple operating systems, so they are not lightweight. They are heavy in the size and they requires more resources as well. So coming to the next slide, let me show you the picture where we can differentiate what is the virtual machine look likes and what is container looking like. So in the virtual machine, you can see we have hyperversion and different operating system are there for the running different applications. But this is not the case of the container. We have one operating system where we can run multiple containers and each containers can have different apps. Now let me go to the next slide. So some important terminologies in Docker. So first of all, what is Docker image? So Docker image is an executable package of software that includes everything needed to run an application. So it is an executable package of software that includes everything needed to run an application. Let's say I have created one Spring Boot application and it requires one web dependency. I'm using database as MySQL, so it requires MySQL driver. So the Docker image is making a executable package of everything, application as well as its dependencies, so that we can run that image in the virtual environments. Okay, so that is what Docker image. Now coming to the Docker container, it is an runtime instance of the image, allows developer to package application with all parts needed such as libraries and other dependency. So it is nothing but it's a running instance of an Docker image. So with the help of Docker file, we create the image and then we run that image to the container. So what is Docker file? The Docker file is nothing but it's a file and where we can write some commands to create the Docker image. Let me go next. This is the Docker container. You can see in one container we are using the Tomcat, Java and the Debian. And in the second container we are using PHP, MySQL and Ubuntu. And the third container we are using static binary and Alpine. So these are the different libraries that requires to run that image. So it's combined in the same image and we are running that in the container. So coming to the next, what is Docker file? It is a text document that contains necessary commands which on execution helps assemble or helps to create a Docker image. So it's set of command. I will show you what is that. Docker image is created using Docker file. Now coming to the Docker engine, the software that hosts the container is named Docker engine. Okay. So in the architecture, I show you what is host, what is Docker daemon. So Docker engine is composed of these three things. It's a client server based application. Okay. So Docker engine has three main components: server, REST APIs, and the client. So let me go to the first slide and then show you. So here you can see there is a host and there is a client, and using the REST APIs we are communicating with the host through the client. So client is a command line interface where we can run some commands, and using the APIs we can communicate with the Docker daemon or Docker host. So this is the Docker engine. It's composed of the client, APIs, and the host. Now coming to the next thing, this is how it's look like. Okay. Now what is Docker Hub? Docker Hub is an official online repository where you can find other Docker images. Like let's say if you want to include the MySQL in your container. So there is a MySQL image that is already provided by the Docker Hub. So from there you can use. So Docker Hub is nothing but it's a repository how we are using the GitHub. In the GitHub we are pushing our codes, and in the Docker Hub we are pushing our images. So that is where we can push our images and we can collect our images there in the Docker Hub. From the Docker Hub, we can, wherever we are require our images, we can uh, deploy on that site. Let's say we want our Docker images in the Jenkins. Then from the Docker Hub, we can take out the images and go let bring it to the Jenkins and then create a pipeline. Similarly, if you want to deploy this Docker image on the AWS, then from the Docker Hub, you can take out that image and then deploy on the AWS. Similarly, for the other clouds as well. So Docker Hub makes it easy to find, manage, and share containers images with the others. This is how, let's say, this is Docker Hub. We have our images in the Docker Hub. If you want to go to the Jenkins, you can go. You can bring your contain. You can bring your images there. You can bring your images to the GitLab. You can bring your images to the OpenStack. Similarly, on the Amazon. So wherever you require your images, you can bring from the Docker Hub. So this is about the introduction video of the Docker. Now in the next video, I will tell you how you can install the Docker desktop, or if you don't have, if you're using Windows, you can also use a Docker toolbox to install the Docker. So just this is about the whole Docker introduction. Okay. So today I'm going to cover the topic how we can install the Docker on our Windows machine. So there is a two way how we can install the Docker on the machine. So there is a one way is to install the Docker toolbox on the Windows. And if you're using Windows 10 and lower than that, then you can go for this. If you're using Windows 11, then you can directly install the Docker desktop there. I'm using Docker desktop in my system. So if you're using Windows 10 or later, then you can go for installing Docker toolbox. How you can install the Docker toolbox? There are a couple of videos on the net. You can find it out, and this is the documentation that you can go through and then install it. You can go for Docker toolbox, and you can open up this first link. You can see this documentation, and you can, according to this documentation, you can install it, and whatever step is there, you can follow it and then install. Coming to the second one is to install the Docker desktop. So you can directly search for the Docker desktop, and you can come here and you can install for the Windows. So you can see if you'll click on this, it is started downloading. I already have this, so I'm not going to download again. So the next step is to set up our Docker Hub. So let me go to the Docker Hub and then Docker Hub. So you need to create one ID and you need to sign up there. And how you will do it, I will show you. I already have did. So this is my personal account. Okay. Let me log it out. I have created this. How you can sign up here is you can go to the Docker Hub. This page will pop up. Then you need to provide your username, okay, and you need to provide your email ID, okay, and then you need to provide the password. You have to agree on these terms, and then you can submit it. Then it will create a account for you, and then from there we can push our images or we can pull our images from there. So I will show you how I have created this account. This is the three fields that you need to provide, and then agree on this condition, and then you can sign up and you can create one Docker Hub account. Now let me go to the sign in and then sign in directly because I already have created it. So let's say it's engineering Adda, and the password I already have saved it. Okay, so it is signing up. So you can see this is how the Docker Hub is looking like. Here you can come to the repository. You can create your own repository. Okay, and like whenever you are trying to push the Docker images from the Docker desktop or from the command line, then it will come here and reflect you. So I will show you in the next videos how you can create Docker images and how you can push to the Docker Hub and how you can pull from the Docker Hub. Everything will cover. Now coming to the Docker desktop, let me try to show you how it is looking like. So I already have installed it. So let me open it. It will take few seconds to run, and you can see it is coming up. I logged in with my personal account. So here you can see there are a couple of tabs are there like containers. Whatever containers are there in your Docker, it will show you. Whatever images are there, it will show you there. So you can see I have created a couple of Docker images. You can see in the containers I have couple of containers here. So this is how it's looking like. So please get ready with the Docker desktop installation or Docker toolbox installation, and please create an account on the Docker Hub. Then we can start. So if you like the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe the channel for more such content. I'm going to follow, like I'm going to create couple of Spring Boot related videos where we can how we can create our Spring Boot application, how we can Dockerize those application, how we can create a Docker image of the, let's say, CRUD application where we are using the MongoDB as a database or MySQL as a database. So everything I'm going to cover. So today I'm going to show you how you can Dockerize your Spring Boot application. So simply I'm going to create a Spring Boot application and I will create a Docker image of it, and I will try to run that Docker image. So in the Docker container. So how we will do that, I will try to show you. So in the last two videos, I have briefed you about what is Docker and how you can install the Docker desktop or how you can install the Docker toolbox on your system. And in this video, I am going to create a Spring Boot application and create a Docker image of that Spring Boot application. Okay, and then we'll try to run it. So let me go to the IntelliJ and then try to create a Spring Boot application. So here you can go to the file, new, and then go to the project. Let me create a Docker demo, something like that. Docker demo app. Okay, let me go next. So I'm creating a simple Spring Boot application. So I'm only going to use the Spring Web. I'm just going to create a get mapping where I will try to return some string there. So let it configure and download the starter dependency, and then after that we'll try to create the APIs. So let me go to the source main and let me go to the Java. So here I'm just going to create one API. So let's say it's a get mapping. Let me try to say it's a get. Okay, and then here let's say it is returning a string get message, something like that. I'm naming this method. Okay, okay, let return some message here. So it's a return Welcome to Engineering Adda. Welcome to Engineering Adda. Okay. Let me make this public. Now this class should be annotated with the @rest controller so that it can behave like a controller, and we have one get mapping here. So, and let me try to change the port name for this, or let it be 8080. So let me try to run this application and then see how the get mapping is working or not. So let it up on the port 8080, which is a default port for the Spring Boot, as you know. So you can see it is up on the port number 8080. Now come to the browser. Let me try to hit it 8080 and then get. So you can see we are able to get the string here, which is welcome to Engineering Adda. Now let me go to the application. So here what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to create a Docker file, and there I will try to do some configuration, and after that we'll try to create the Docker image. So go to the file, and please keep this note that the Docker file name should be capital D and then everything should be small. So it's a Docker file, okay, and just add it. Now here we need to do some configuration. So I'm just going to add this from JDK, open JDK, and the version is 17. So this should be installed in our Docker image so that we can run our application there. So it should be from OpenJDK 17. Now coming to, we need to expose some port number here. So why we are like where we can use this port number. So this is to communicate from outside of the container. Like outside world can communicate using this port number to the container that we are going to create. So let me provide the port number as 9090. Okay. Now coming to the next configuration, we need to add the jar file here. So where the jar file will be generated, it's inside the target folder. Let me name the jar file to docker demo app.jar, and let me, this is the location where the jar file will be generated. Okay, let me provide the jar file name here. Now let me try to create the entry point configuration, so from where we can run our jar files. So it's a java comma minus jar, and then we need to provide the name of the jar file that we are going to create. So let's say slash docker demo.jar. So coming here in the target, you can see no jar file is there, nothing is created. Now let me go to the pom.xml file and then try to create the final name for the jar file. So let's say it's name of the jar file will be docker demo app. Okay. Now we are good with the configuration of the docker file and the pom.xml. Now let me try to do a maven install so that we can build the application, and when we'll try to do the maven install, it will create the docker file for us. Sorry, it will create the jar file for us. So let me come here and let me try to do the maven install. So it will take few seconds to do the build, and once the build is done, the jar file will be created inside the target folder, and after that with the docker command we can try to generate our docker image. So yeah, let's let it done first. So you can see build is success. Now go to the target folder. You can see we have created the jar file with the name called Docker demo app. Okay, so how we can create our Docker image? So you can come here to the terminal and you can see it has opened inside the same folder structure where we have created our application, where our Docker file is. So here also you can run the Docker command and create the Docker image. And you can also open a terminal, and then from there you can also create the Docker image by running the Docker command. So I'm going to open a terminal here. So this is the application that we have created. This is the folder structure for that. Let me try to open a command prompt here. Okay, so first of all, let me try to show you what all the images are there in my Docker. So let me try to run the command docker images. So you can see I have this many images: Spring Boot, Docker Final, Spring Boot auth, Mongo, MySQL. These are the images. These are the tags, ID of the image, and when it is created, what is the size of it. So we don't have any image with the name called Docker demo application. Now we are going to create it. So let me try to do that. So the command is docker build -t, and then we need to provide the name of the Docker image that we are going to generate. So let's say I'm going to create Docker demo app, and then we need to provide the root here and then enter. So it will take few seconds to create your Docker image. For me, it is not taking much time because I already have the open JDK in my Docker, or whatever JDK you are going to use. You should be first, it will take few minutes for you to download it because it is of around 500 MB. So depends upon your internet speed. It will take some time to download it because I already have in my Docker. So that is why it is not taking much time to generate my Docker image. So now our Docker image with the name Docker demo app is generated. Let me try to show you. So let me try to run the command Docker images, and here you can see we have created one image called Docker demo app, and it is created 39 seconds ago. Now let me go to the Docker desktop, and here also you can see those images. So you can see Docker demo app is created and less than 1 minute ago, and this is the size of that. Okay, from here also you can run this Docker image in a Docker container. Okay, and from here also you can select it, and let me try to select it. There are a couple of options that it provides. You can see from here we can push it to the hub or pull it from the hub, view the detail of it. So this is very much helpful when we are using Docker desktop. It makes our work easy. So now let me go to the command, and from there we'll try to run the Docker image. So let me try to run the image in the container. So command to run the image is docker run -p, and here we need to provide the port number to which our container is exposed. So it is 9090, and this is the port number on which our application is up. So it is 8080. Now let me provide the Docker image name. So it's a Docker demo app. Okay, and now hit the enter. So you can see our application is started on the port 8080, but we can access it through the port number 9090, which is a container port. Okay, so we can access through the container only. So we are going to access this application to the port number 9090. So let me come here and let me try to show you. So this application is not running. Okay, and we have not configured the port number for this application. So it is defaultly will run on the port number 8080. Now let me try to show you what is the API that we have created. So the API is get, and when we are going to hit this API, we are able to see this message. So let me try to run locally. So is HTTP localhost 9090. Okay, and then we need to provide the API for get mappings, which is get hinter, and then you can see we are able to see the message from the application. So our application is running on the container inside the Docker. So this is how we can create our Docker image. We can run our image in the container and try to get the APIs. So this is about this video. So in this video, I am going to show you how you can push your Docker image to your Docker hub, or how you can pull your image from the Docker hub. So let me go to the browser first, and then let me log into the Docker hub. So Docker hub, let me try to log in here, sign in, provide your username and the password. So once it is login, what I will do, I will try to push one image from my local to this Docker hub repository. So how we'll do that, I will tell you. First of all, let me show you what all the images are there in my repository in the Docker hub. So you can see I have only one image, which is Docker demo application in my repository, and my repository name is EnggAdda. Okay, so let me open a command prompt, and let me show you what all the images I have in my local. So let me run the command called docker images. Let me maximize this. So you can see I have this much of images. Okay, I already have pushed this image to my Docker hub. Now I'm going to push this image Spring Boot or.jar to my Docker hub. So when you are going to push the image to the Docker hub, you need to create a tag with the repository name. So I'm going to create a tag first. So the command to create a tag is docker tag, provide the image name. So let me try to copy the image name, paste it out, and then you need to provide the repository name, which is engineering adda in my case, and then you need to provide the docker image name again, and then enter. So let me try to show you docker images. So you can see we have created one image with the tag name engineering adda and then spring boot auth.jar. So this is the new image that we have created. Now let me try to push it. So first of all, let me copy it, and then we have the command called docker push, and then paste the image name. Let me enter it. So you can see it is started pushing the image. So it will take few minutes to push the image to the Docker hub, because it is very big in the size. So that is why it can take some time. If it is not pushed in one time, you can try for more other times. Okay, sometimes it can fail because of the connectivity issue. While we are pushing the image to the Docker hub, sometimes it is disconnected. So you have to log in again and then push it. So here you can see it is pushing up. Three of the layers are pushed, I think, and the fourth one is pushing now. Let wait for some time. Let it complete. Okay, three of them are pushed. Now the third one is still trying to push. So if it is not pushed, it will fail. Then again we need to run the command to push the Docker image from our local to the Docker hub. So it is again started pushing. Let's see, four, all of four are pushed. Now let's see what is the result. So you can see we have pushed the Docker image from our local to the Docker hub. Now let me come here to the Docker hub and then refresh this page. Okay, this is also taking some time. I don't know why. So you can see we have pushed this image Spring Boot or .jar a few seconds ago. So this is how you can push your Docker image from your local machine to the Docker Hub account, and from here you can share your image wherever you wanted. You can deploy this image to the AWS container everywhere, wherever you wanted, you can use it from here. Now coming to the next operation, how you can pull your image from the Docker Hub. So let me go to the Docker engine, Docker desktop, and you can see we have this image called EnggAdda Spring Boot or .jar, which we pushed now to the Docker Hub. Let me try to delete this image from the local and then try to pull it from the Docker Hub. So I'm deleting it now. So it is deleted. I can run the command also to show you if it is there in our local or not. So let me try to run the command docker images. So here you can see we don't have the image, which is engineering adda slash this Spring Boot auth. We have this image and this image, not the one that we have pushed now to the Docker Hub. So let me try to pull it from the Docker Hub. So what is the image name? Let me try to show you. So this is the image name engineering adda slash Spring Boot or .jar. Copy this, come to the command prompt and then run this command docker pull and then okay, let me try to log in again, log into the Docker first. Docker login. It is asking for the username. You need to provide the username. Now provide the password. Okay. Okay. It is giving some error. Let me try to log in again. Give me the username. Provide the password. Login succeeded. Now let me try to pull the Docker image from the Docker Hub. So the command is docker pull, provide the image name which is engineering adda slash spring. Let me see the name. What is the name of the image? spring boot or .jar. Come to the command prompt spring boot auth .jar and then enter. So it will try to pull again. It is telling us to some error. You can say it is giving timeout. Let me try to pull again. So this time you can see it has downloaded the newer image for engineering adda spring boot docker spring boot or .jar latest. So this time it has downloaded our image from the docker hub to the local. Let me try to run the command docker images and then show you if it is there in the local or not. So you can see it is downloaded now. Okay, so this is how you can use the docker push and pull command to push the docker image to the docker hub and pull from the docker hub to the local. So this is about this video, guys. So today I'm going to show you how you can dockerize your spring boot application, where we are using the database as a MongoDB, and we will be creating a CRUD project here in the spring boot, and we are using the database as MongoDB. So how we can dockerize the whole application, how we can create a docker container, and how this CRUD project is interacting with the MongoDB database. So I will show you how you can do that. So we need to create a container for the MongoDB. We need to create a container for our application, and then both of the container will be communicating with each other. So I will show you how you can do it in the Docker. So let's get started. Let me go to the IntelliJ and then let me try to create a Spring Boot project first. Okay, so after that, what I will do, I will try to show you how you can create the Docker image of the Spring Boot project as well as the MongoDB database that we are going to use. So let me come here, let me go to the new project. Okay, let me try to give the name as Spring Boot MongoDB CRUD. Okay, now let me go next. Let me try to include some starter dependency like Spring Web and Lombok, and the database that we are going to use is MongoDB. So let me try to include the Spring Data MongoDB here. Okay, let me try to create this. So it will take few seconds to configure itself. When it is configured, then we can start our development here. Let me close this. You can see here it is configuring the pom.xml file. It is resolving the map and dependencies. So let it done. Okay, I think we are good now. So let me go to the source main Java, and let me create a entity class as well as the repository and the controller as well. I'm not going to develop the service here. So let me create those packages first. So let's say it's a entity. Okay, let me create the repository package and controller. Okay, now I'm going to create a, let's say, student entity, and we are trying to insert some student record into the database, and we'll try to fetch out some record from the database. So let me create a student entity here. So student, add it. Let me try to annotate this with @entity. Okay, let me try to create first of all argument constructor, no argument, git array and setters, and then because we are using the MongoDB, so here it is document. Okay, we are not going to create the table here, so it is document here, and we are going to give the name as collection name as student collection. Okay, let me try to put here some underscore. Okay, so it will create one collection inside the database, and its name would be student collection. And this document is similarly how we are creating the table, so similar way the document will be created with the name collection. Now let me go to the repository, and then let me try to create a student repo. Interface. Let this repository extend the MongoDB repository. So let's say it's a MongoDB Mongo repository. Okay. Here we need to provide these two argument. One is the entity name, and second is the uh, ID of the entity. Okay. So let me provide some instance here in the student class. So let's say it's a student ID, which is of integer type. Okay, let me try to create the name of a student, which is of a string type, and let me try to create the age. Let's say it's int age. So we are keeping these three instance here for the student, and this should be the ID. So I'm just annotating it with the @ID. Now come here to the student repo, and here we need to provide the two argument. One is the entity class, which is student, and the ID type of the student, which is integer. Okay, now we're done with this. Now let me go to the controller and try to create one controller class. So let's say it's student controller. Add it. Let me try to annotate this with the REST controller, and let me try to put some mapping here at the class level. So I'm using request mapping. Let's say it's API. Okay. Now let me try to create a get mapping here. So with the help of get mapping, what we'll try to do, we'll try to uh, let's say find all the student record from the database. So let me try to create the method name. It is returning the list of the students. So student get all students, something like that. Return. Let me import the list here, and the student class, it is already imported. Okay. So with the help of the Mongo repository provided method, we are going to call the find all method to get the all record of the student from the database. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to auto wire the instance of the student repository here. So let's say private student repo. Okay, and with the help of this, we'll try to call all the Mongo repository provided method. So let me call the find all method here and return the list of the student from the database. Now let me try to create one get mapping where I'm just finding out the student by the ID. So for that, let me try to provide the find, and then let me try to provide the ID here. And here in the argument, we need to pass that ID as a path variable so that we can pass it in the URL that we are going to hit. So it should be returning the student. Let me change the return type to student. Okay, and then let me try to create this method get student by ID. Okay, let me pass the ID here, and there is a method called find by ID. So I'm going to call that find by ID, and then we'll pass the ID here. And this ID should be, we are passing in the form of URL, so it should be passed as a path variable. And here we need to do the get and return it. So we have created these two mappings, which is get mapping, which is finding out the student record from the database. And let me try to create one mapping, post mapping, so that we can put some record into the database. So let's say it's insert, and then let me try to create the mapping for it. So let's say it's a public student insert. Okay, let me try to pass the request body here. So in the form of request, we are passing out the student object from the client, which is Postman, and it will be inserted to the database. So student repo, and there is a method called save, and we need to pass the student here and then return this. So it will return whatever student we are going to insert. So we are done with the creation of the post and the get mapping, and let me try to do some configuration here. So let me go to the resource. Let me try to create one application.yml file. So application.yml. Let me try to add it. So I'm going to do the configuration for the MongoDB. So let's say it is Spring Data MongoDB. I need to set the database name, host, and the port. So host, let's say it's localhost, port. The default port for this is, for the MongoDB, is 27017, and let's say the database is, so the database name that I'm going to provide here is, this is the student controller and student entity. So I'm going to create a database called student database, something like that, student DB. So let's say it's student DB. Let me try to do, yeah. So here we are providing the host name, port name, and the database name. So for now I keep the host name as localhost, but whenever we are going to create the Docker image for this application, and this application will be communicating with the MongoDB instance in the Docker for their database work. So at that time, whatever container that we will be creating for the MongoDB, that container name will need to provide here in the place of the host. So now the host is localhost, but if you want to communicate the Docker image of this application to the MongoDB instance in the Docker, then you need to provide the container name of the MongoDB. So let me try to update this, and let me try to keep the container name of the MongoDB as a EnggAdda. So with this name, what we'll do, we'll try to create a container of the MongoDB in the Docker. So EnggAdda, I'm just putting it like this. Okay, so we are done with the configuration. Now let me try to create a Docker file here. So let me go new, and then file, and then we need to provide the name here, which is Docker file. Please remember that whenever you are going to create the Docker file, then you need to provide the name in this format only. D should be capital, and then everything should be small after that. Okay, so now let me try to create it, add it, and then let me try to do some Docker file configuration. So we are using OpenJDK for our application, and the OpenJDK version is 17 that I'm going to use. Okay. Now we need to create the jar file for this application. So I'm just going to add the jar file to this target location. So, and let's say our jar file name would be Spring Boot Docker MongoDB, something like that. So let's say it's Boot Spring Boot Mongo Docker. Okay, dot jar. Let me try to copy this and provide the name. This is the location where the jar will be created, and this is the name of the jar. Now let me try to create the entry point here. Okay, so the entry point is Java minus jar, Java minus jar, and then we need to provide the jar file name. So this is the jar file. Put a forward slash and then provide this. So this is what we need to do in the Docker file. Now we are done with the configuration of the Docker file. Let me remove the space here. Okay, so let me go to the pom.xml and then try to put the final name here in the build, so that with the name a Docker file will be created. With the name a jar file will be creating in the target folder. So let me try to provide the name of that jar file. So let me go to the Docker file, copy this name and come to the pom.xml and then put it here. Now we need to build this application. So let me go to the Maven, go to this Maven execute, and I need to do the Maven install. So that after that, when the build will be succeed, then a jar file will be created inside the target folder. So let me come here. Let's wait for the build to be succeed. So you can see one target folder is generated here. You can come inside it and you can see one jar file is generated with the name Spring Boot Mongo Docker that we have provided here. So we are done with the creation of the jar file. Now what we need to do, we need to create a Docker image of this application, and we need to have a Docker image of the MongoDB in our Docker. So let me try to open the Docker desktop that I have installed already, or whatever uh, tool you are going to use for the Docker, like Docker Toolbox, or I'm using the Docker desktop. So any of them you can use to carry out your Docker work. So once it is up, what I need to do, I need to create a image of the application that we have created, and I need to pull the image of the MongoDB from the Docker hub. So I already have did. I let me open a terminal and then let me show you what all the images I have and what all I need to create. So first of all, let me go to the place where we have created the application. So it is Spring Mongo DB CRUD. Let me go to this location. Okay, engineering adda and then project. Okay, okay, it is inside this folder, I think. Okay, so let me open it. Let me open a command prompt here and let me try to run some Docker command. So let me try to run the command Docker images to show what all the images I have. So you can see I have MongoDB, sorry, Mongo image, and I have couple of other images as well. So if you don't have the Mongo image on your local, then you need to pull it from the Docker hub. So for that, the command is docker pull and then Mongo, and you can provide the version of that. So let's say you can do latest and then enter. So what it will do, it will try to pull out the, you can see it is pulling the library Mongo from the from the Docker hub for you in your local. So you need to have this to carry out your work. So I already have. So you need to run the command docker pull Mongo, and you can provide the version here. So once you are having the Mongo image in your local, then I'm going to create the Docker image of our application. So we are already there in the folder structure where we have the Docker file. Let me show you. So we are here inside this folder structure, and you can see we have the Docker file here. So you need to open a command prompt here. I already have did that. And to create a image of this application, we need to run the Docker command. So it is docker build and then -t, and then you need to provide the name of the Docker image that you want to create. So let me try to name it Spring Mongo image, something like that. Spring Mongo app. Okay. And then you need to provide the root here. So you need to provide the dot. This is the command. Let me try to hit enter. So you can see it is started building our Docker image. Okay. So let me try to run the command docker images and then let me try to show you. So you can see it is creating one Docker image with the name is Spring Mongo app that we have provided, and it has created it 8 seconds ago. So we are now done with the creation of Docker image of our application. We have the Mongo instance here in our local Docker. Okay, so we have these two things in our local system. Now what I need to do, I need to create a container of the MongoDB instance. So for that we need to run the command docker run minus d minus p, and then you need to provide the port number for that. So the default port for the MongoDB is 2017. I'm providing that 201 27017 and then 27017, and then name of that container should be EnggAdda that we have already provided here in our application. You can see. Let me go to the application YML file. You can see. Let me copy it from here. Come to the command prompt. Provide the Docker container name for the MongoDB, and the image is Mongo. Okay, and its tag is latest. You can also provide the tag. So this is the command. Now let me try to enter. So you can see we have created one container for the MongoDB instance, and the container name is EnggAdda. So let me show you that. So let me try to run the command docker ps. So you can see we have one container EnggAdda, and the Docker image is Mongo. Okay, so we have the container for the Mongo, and we already have the Docker image of our application. Now we need to link both of them and then make it run. So for that, let me try to run a command called docker run minus p, and we need to provide the port number. So let's say I'm putting the port number 8080, which is the default port for our application. Okay, and then let me try to give the name of the image. So the image name is Spring Mongo app, Spring Mongo app, and then we need to link it to the container that we have created, which is engineering Adda and Mongo, and then we need to provide the Spring Boot application Docker image name, which is Spring Mongo app. Spring Mongo app, and let me provide the version of that latest one. Okay, so let me try to hit this command. So we have created a link between both of them. Okay, and our application should be up now. So it is not showing here. Let me come to the Docker desktop and then let me try to show you. So let me go to the container, and this is the container which is linking the Spring Boot application as well as the MongoDB container, and it is running on the port number 8080, right? Let me try to run it from here. Let me try to do restart. Okay, so it is running on the port number 8080. Let me try to open a postman and let me try to hit some endpoints. Okay, so let me go to the intelligent. Let's see what is the API that we have developed. So let me try to go to the controller first. Okay, so for post mapping, it is API slash insert, and then we need to provide the student request. So let me come here. Okay, let me try to do that. So it is 8080, and the database or the collection name that we are creating is student collection, I think. Let me go to the entity and then show you. So this is the collection name. Okay, come here to the postman 8080 API slash insert, and what all the instances are there: ID, name, and the age. So ID should be 101, and let's say name is Naman, and age is 24. And let me change the method to post. Let me try to enter it. So you can see we are able to insert one record into the database, which is MongoDB database. Okay. Now let me try to insert some other records. Let's say it is 102. Name should be, let's say, Amit, and age I'm keeping as 24 only. Let me try to send it. So it is also inserted. Now let me try to run the get mapping. So let me go to the controller. You can see for get mapping we have find all and the find by ID. So let me try to find all first and then find by ID. So find all, change the method type to get, and then send. So you can see we are able to get these two records. Let me try to check the find API as well. So find, and then we need to provide the ID 101. Let me try to enter it. So you can see. So whatever API post and the get we have developed, it is working fine. So it is showing that we are able to connect with the MongoDB in the Docker, and we are able to try to hit our APIs from the Postman client, and it is working fine. So you can see this is running in the container called Spring Mongo app, and we are able to hit this APIs that we have created. Okay, you can see this application is not up, it is not running. We are running the Docker container of this application that we have created and linked to the MongoDB container. So everything is working fine. So this is about this video, guys. So today I'm going to cover the topic how we can Dockerize our Spring Boot application when we are using the MySQL as a database. So this is what I'm going to cover today. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to create a Spring Boot application. So let me go to the IntelliJ and let me try to create a Spring Boot application. So here what we'll do, we'll try to create the CRUD operations in the Spring Boot application, and then we'll try to create the Docker image of this Spring Boot application. We'll try to create the Docker image of MySQL database, and we'll try to connect both of them and then see how it is working. So let's say I'm giving the name to this application as Spring Boot, Spring Boot MySQL Docker. Okay. Now let me go next. Let me include some starter dependency like Lombok, Spring Web, and then for the SQL I'm going to use the Spring Data JPA and MySQL as a driver. Okay, and then create it. Open in a new tab. It will take few seconds to configure itself. So once it is configured, we can start our development. So let me maximize this. Now come here, come to the source main. Okay, it's still not loaded in the form of Maven project. So let's wait for some time. Or let me close and reopen it. So let me come to the file and open recent Spring Boot MySQL Docker new. So let's wait for some seconds. Here you can see it is asking me to load as a Maven project. So now it will configure like a Maven project. So here you can see it is started resolving the dependencies. Okay, let me minimize this. Now come to the source, main and Java. Here let me try to create the packages. So let me try to create one package called entity and some other packages like repo. Not going to create the service here, directly going to use the JPA provided method in the controller. So I'm creating the controller package, controller. Okay. Now let me create one entity called student. Okay. Add this. Let me try to create some instance variable here. So let's say private integer ID. Okay. Private string name and private int age, something like that. Okay. So I'm taking these three variables here. Now let me try to create ID for this, and then let me try to annotate getter setters all argument no argument constructors. So I'm using the Lombok for that. Now let me try to create the table here, and let's say the name of the table would be student. Okay, and this is the entity class, so let me try to annotate with @entity. So we are done with the creation of our entity class. Okay, now let me use this as auto generated value. Strategy should be auto generated auto or identity. Let me keep like a identity here. So why it is giving errors? Read ID. We are not adding the correct ID, I think. So let me remove this and then try to add it again. ID. So we are done with the creation of entity class. Now what I need to do, I need to create the repository here. So let me go to the repo and create a student repo interface. Okay, it should be interface. Let me change it to the interface. Now it should be extending the JPA repository. So let me extend that JPA repository. Here we need to pass these two arguments. One is the entity class name, which is student, and type of ID, which is integer type. Now let me go to the controller and create two APIs here. So let's say a student controller. Okay, let me try to annotate this with request map REST controller and the request mapping to map something at the class level. So let's say I'm mapping like a student. Okay, now let me create one get mapping, one post mapping. So here let me map it like find all. Okay, and get all student, creating the method called get all student, which will return the list of the student from the database. So let's say it's a list of student. Okay, let me import the list here from Java util. Now it should be public. Okay, and then simply we are going to return all the list of students from the database. So for that we need to auto wire the student repository here. So let me auto wire this private student repo, so that with the help of this reference we can call the JPA provided method. So let me try to use the find all method here and then simply return it. So we are fetching out all the record from the database and then returning it. Now let me try to create one post mapping so that we can insert some record there. So it's post mapping, and let me map like insert, and then it will return the student object but we are inserting, and insert, and here we need to provide the request with the help of request body. So let's say it's a student. Okay, and then we have to use the same method here. So save and then pass the student here and then simply return it. So we are able to create this get mapping and the post mapping. So we are good with the creation of our application. Now let me create the Docker file so that we can create the Docker image of this application. And I need to do some configuration in the application.properties file. So first of all, let me create the Docker image for this. So go next, create a file, Docker file. Please remember, this is how the Docker file look like. D should be capital and everything should be small. Add it. Now let me do some configuration here. So we need to add from OpenJDK, and the version for the JDK I'm going to use is 17, and I need to add the location of the jar file. So it should be target slash name of the jar file, which is, let's say I'm going to name it like a Spring Boot Docker, Spring Boot MySQL Docker. Okay, dot jar, Spring Boot MySQL Docker dot jar. Pass the jar name here, and then now let me try to configure the entry point. So it should be Java minus jar and then the name of the jar file, which is this. Okay, so we are done with the configuration of Docker file. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do the configuration for this application.properties file. Okay, so here what I need to do, so I need to provide the URL, username and the password. Okay, so Spring jpa dot hibernate autoddl. I'm making it as update so that it can create the database and table automatically. Now let me do the configuration for use this username, password and URL. So Spring Data JPA Spring dot data source dot URL. Similarly, Spring dot data source password and then username. Spring. Let me try to copy this and let put the date name here, username here. So now what I need to do, I need to provide the URL. So URL should be JDBC and then MySQL, and then we need to pass the host name. So right now let me keep this host name as a local host. Okay, and then we need to pass the port number and the database name. So the default port for the MySQL is 3306 and the database name, let's say I'm going to use the database name as test. Okay, and username I'm just keeping like root, and the password for me is Ravi at the rate 1998, something like that. Okay, this is what I'm just keeping for now, but when we are creating the Docker image for MySQL and when we are configuring that, so according to that we need to configure this username, URL and the password. So I will show you what we need to do that. For now I'm just keeping it like this only. So now let me, so we are done with the creation of application. We created the Docker file, we configured the application properties file here. Now let me go and then try to create the Docker image of the MySQL database. Okay, so let me open the Docker desktop first so that our Docker daemon will be up. If you are using the Docker toolbox, make sure your Docker daemon is up. So let me minimize this. Let me remove this D from here. So our Docker is up. Okay, now let me open a command prompt and then show you what all the images I have. You can also see from here in the Docker desktop. So you can see all the images that I have and what all the containers that I have. Okay, so you can see I have the image MySQL version 8.0.31 and the version 8.0.13. So I'm going to use the 8.0.13 for now because I have MySQL installed of this version. So that is why. So let me try to show you those images here. So let's say Docker images and then you can see. Okay, so I have the MySQL of the version this and I'm going to use it. So for that, what I need to do, I need to create a Docker image of the MySQL database with the password and the database name. So let me try to create that. So the command for that is docker run -p, and then we need to provide the port number. So let's say I'm providing the external port number like 3307 and the default port for that is 3306, which we use for the internal communication. And let's say the name of the container would be MySQL DB. Okay, and let me provide the environment variable here. So let's say the MySQL root password is root MySQL root password. Okay, I'm providing the root password as root. And let me try to introduce the database name here. So MySQL underscore database, and let's say I'm making the database name as test. Okay, now we need to provide the version of the MySQL image that we are going to use. So MySQL, and then the version I'm going to use 8.0.13. Okay, now let's enter it. Okay, it is telling us Docker invalid reference format. Okay, so Docker minus p, and then we need to provide this, then the name. Okay, and then we are giving the name of our Docker image. We need to provide the root password. Okay, and let me remove this space from here. Okay, and then database name. Okay, let me try to enter. So you can see it is initializing. Okay, it will create the Docker container for this Docker image of MySQL. So let it do. Okay, let me come here to the Docker desktop and show you. So you can come to the container, and you can see one MySQL DB container is running on the port number 3306, which is default port, and for external use we can use this port. So what I'm going to do, so let me do some configuration here in the our application. Okay, and then what I can do, I can also configure the application properties file according to the image that we have created, according to the Docker container that we have created for the MySQL, and then we'll try to connect our Docker image running MySQL to the local MySQL workbench. So let me try to do that. So let me change the configuration here. So let's say it should be MySQL, and the host can be my host. So I already have written those configuration here. So let me try to go and then copy paste it for you, and then I will explain you. So let me come here. I will provide the link of this repository from the Git, so you can from there you can just take a look from that. So you can see if we are not using the local host, then MySQL host which we have created, which is the Docker container of the MySQL, okay, that it should use, and the MySQL port which we are going to set, so that will it can use. Okay, in the else case it can use the default port. So similarly, uh, we are going to set the MySQL user. If it is not taking up from there, in the else case it can use the root. Similarly for the password, so everything will provide. If it is not picking up from there, it will use the default one. Okay, so this is what we need to do for the application.properties file. Let me do some Spring configuration here. So you can come here and then edit configuration, and then modify, and you need to use the add VM option, and here we need to provide some configuration. So let's say it's d minus d mysql. Okay, and user, I'm providing the user as root. Okay, and similarly for the password, minus d mysql underscore password, and providing the password is root only. Okay, and then we need to provide the port. So let's say it's root, and then what we need to provide? We need to provide the password. So for that, what it will be? It will be -d, and then it would be MySQL underscore. Sorry, we need to provide the port. So for that, it will be -d underscore MySQL underscore port. Okay, and we need to provide the port number. So the external port for the MySQL we have set is 3307. So we have to do this three configuration. We are setting up the username, we are setting up the password, and we are setting up the port. Okay, now let me apply and then okay. So what I'm going to connect my MySQL workbench to the running instance of the MySQL DB. Okay, so let me try to open the MySQL workbench. So MySQL workbench, and then what we can do, let me try to add one new connection here. So let's say it's Spring MySQL Docker. Okay, and here we need to provide the port number we are setting as 3307, and let me try to do the connection. So let me provide the password which is root that we have set. Okay, so you can see it is connected, so you can do okay and then okay here, and let me try to open this connection. So you can see the test database that we have configured, it already created here in this database. Okay, so we are good with the connection of our local running instance of the MySQL database in the Docker with the workbench. Okay, so what is the next step that I'm going to do? I'm just going to create the uh, Docker image of our application, and then we'll try to connect it. Okay, so let me try to do that. Let me minimize this. Now where we are. Okay, so for that I already have written the Docker file. Okay, and what else I'm going to do? I'm going to create a Docker image of our application. So before going to create the Docker image, what we need to do? We need to create one network so that we can bind our running instance of the MySQL DB to the running instance of our Spring Boot MySQL Docker image. Okay, so for that we need to create one network here. So let me create the network first. So you can come here and you can create the network. So for command for that is docker. Let me show you the networks. Okay, so you can see okay, these are the commands inside the docker network. So we need to use the docker network create to create a network. So let's say docker network and then create, and then we need to provide the network name. So let's say I'm using the network name as a Spring Net. Okay, so okay, it is already existing. So let's say a Docker network, Spring network. Okay, and then create it. So it has created this. Now what we need to do? We need to connect our running instance of the MySQL DB to this network, and then we need to connect the running instance of our Spring Boot application to this instance. So so before going there, let me try to create the Docker image of our Spring Boot application. So come here from the terminal. Here also you can create the Docker image, or you can create your Docker image from the command prompt. So let me try to create it from the command prompt. So we need to open the location where our Docker file is. So let me go to this. I have created this project here. So this is the project MySQL Docker. Okay. And you can see this is our Docker file. So let me open a command prompt here. And then let me show you what all the images are there. Docker images. You can see our MySQL is there. Okay. And we have not created our Docker image for this application. So let me create it. So the command for that is docker build -t, and then you need to provide the Docker image name. So let's say I'm giving the name as Docker, Spring Docker or Spring MySQL Docker. Okay. And then you need to provide the root here and then enter. So it will create the Docker image of your application. Okay. Let me try to rerun this. Target Spring Boot MySQL Docker.jar. Okay. So the name should be Spring Boot MySQL Docker.jar Spring Boot. Why it is failing? Target Spring Boot MySQL Docker.jar Spring Boot MySQL Docker.jar. Okay. Let me come to the Docker desktop and see what is happening. Come to the country images. It is not created here. Let me try to. Okay, so it is not creating because we have not built our application. So before going there, let me try to build our application to create our jar file. It is not finding out the target location. The jar file is not there in the target location. So how we can create the jar file? We need to do maven install. So before that, let me try to do some configuration in the pom.xml. So let me come here to the plugins and then let me try to add the jar file name here. So let's say final name and then let me provide the jar file name, which is Spring Boot Docker, which is Spring Boot MySQL Docker, I think. Yeah, Spring Boot MySQL Docker. So with this name, it will create one jar file, or you can match it from here, Docker file, and then copy this and come to the pom.xml and then paste it out. Okay. Now let me try to do maven install. So go to the maven, execute maven commands and then maven install. So it will build our application and then one target folder will be created here and inside that one jar file will be generated, and then after that we can create our Docker image. So let it build. It will take few seconds. Okay, I think we are done. Okay, zero failure, zero error. You can see build success and you can see the target folder is created here. Inside that you can see Spring Boot MySQL Docker jar is there. So we are done with the creation of jar. Now let me go to the command prompt and then let me try to create the Docker image and then enter. So this time you can see it is creating the Docker image. So let me try to run the command docker images and then show you. So you can see here we have created our Spring Boot MySQL Docker image 6 seconds ago. Okay. So what is the next thing that I'm going to do? I'm going to connect the running instance of the MySQL DB to the network that we have created earlier. So the network name was Spring Network. Okay. So let me do that. So for that we need to run this command, which is network connect and network name and the container name. So let's say Docker network, and then network name Spring Network, okay, and then the container name. So the container name was MySQL DB. Let me show you. So you can run this command docker ps, and then here you can see the container name, which is MySQL DB. Running container is MySQL DB here. So that we need to connect to the Docker network. Let me try to show you something. Docker network. So here you can see we have this much networks. So we have created this Spring network, okay, and earlier it was having one doc Spring net, okay, so that is why it was not creating that time. So you can see we have our network here, Spring network, and we are going to create one connection with the MySQL DB with the MySQL DB to the Spring network. Okay, so for that the command is docker network name, which is Spring. Okay, it is docker network connect, and then we need to provide the connect network name, which is Spring network, and then the container name. So what is Spring network and then container name, which is MySQL DB, and then enter. Let me try to run this command docker network inspect. Okay, we need to provide the Spring network. So here you can see the inspect of the Docker network. Okay, so here you can see with this network we have created one connection of the MySQL DB container. Okay, so you can see inside the container it is showing this, and you can also go to the Docker desktop. From here also I think you can see it, container, MySQL container, and inspect. You can see this password and the database that we have set here. Network is not being able to see. Go to the stat, nothing is there. Terminal, nothing, no problem. So from there you can see the network inspect. Okay, you can run this command docker network inspect and Spring network, which is the network name. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to we have created the network, we have added the MySQL DB container to that network. Now what we need to do, we need to add the Spring Boot application and run that Spring Boot application. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the Spring Boot application to the doc Docker network that we have created, where the MySQL DB is already connected, and then with the whole three things, what we are going to do, we are going to run the container. So for that I already have the commands. So let me try to copy that command. I will explain you what is the command is. So you can see this is the command docker run -p, and then we need to provide the uh, external port number on which our application will be up, and this is the internal port number, and then we need to provide the name of our Spring Boot image that we have created, okay, and then the network name so that it can connect with this network, okay. And now we need to provide some other environment variable details, which is MySQL host. So the host name we need to provide is MySQL, which is MySQL DB, which is the container name of the running instance of our MySQL. And then we need to provide the username and the password and the port name, okay. And here we are just passing the Docker image. So let me change the Docker network here. So it is Spring Network and everything is same. So you can take a look on this and then you can do according to this. Okay. Now let me try to remove this. Okay, let me try to make this in a one line. Okay, this is the name of our application, Spring Boot Docker image, Spring Boot MySQL Docker. Okay, so let me copy this command and then come here and then let me try to run this. Okay, so you can see this will make the connection with our network where our database is already connected, and it will uh, it will start running our application. So you can see our application is up on the port number 8080, but this is the internal port. We can access our APIs through the external port, which is 9090. Let me go to the Docker desktop and then show you. So you can come here to the container and then you can see this application is up. Okay, and the port number is 9090. So let me open the Postman, and then what we'll do, we'll try to hit some APIs and then see how it is connected to the database and if some record is inserting inside the database or not. So let it open and let me go to the controller first and then let me show you what is the API that we have created. So student controller, and port number is 9090, and then API is student, and to insert it is insert, and then we need to pass the student request. So ID, name and age. So let me go to the Postman, close this. Okay, 9090 and then student and then insert. Okay, and here you need to pass the ID, name and the age. So let's say Aman. Okay, ID is, we can also skip the ID because it is auto generated, and the age should be 23, let's say, and I'm going to post it. Okay, so you can see it is inserted and we can see the record here. Let me go to the database and then let me select this test database, go to the table. Here you can see one student table is created. Let me try to run the command, select star from student. Okay, let me run this. So you can see we have inserted one record and it is reflecting into the database as well. So this is good. Now let me try to insert some other record also. So let's say name is Rahul and age is 24 and then insert it. You can see Rahul is also inserted. Let me go to the database and then run this command. You can see it is inserted. Now let me try to hit the find all API, find all, and then change the method name to get and then send. So you can see we are able to fetch it from the database. So this is about this video, guys. If you So today we are going to cover the topic Docker Compose. So I will be telling you how you can create your Docker Compose.yml file and how you can configure everything inside it so that we can create this container of the application that we are going to develop. We can create the container of the database that we are going to use, and we can link both of them together using Docker Compose file. So we need to do some configuration there in the Docker Compose file. So I will try to show you how you can do that. So here in this video, I'm going to develop one Spring Boot CRUD project, and the database that we are going to use is MySQL, and with the help of Docker Compose file, we'll try to create the container of the application as well as the database, and we'll try to link both of them. So it is a single file, and using the Docker Compose only, we have to do some configuration, and once the Docker Compose file is up, then it automatically take care of creating the containers of the application and the database and taking care of the connection between them. So let me try to go next, and then let me try to show you what is Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is nothing but it's a command line tool that uses a specially formatted descriptor file to make multiple containers and assemble them into an applications. So let's say in the earlier video I already showed you that how you can create the container of the application as well as the database and how you can communicate them using the Docker commands. But here with the help of Docker Compose we'll try to configure such things that it will automatically create the container for the application as well as for the database, and it will try to get the communication between them. Okay, so this is what Docker Compose do. So it can take care of the multiple containers which can then be run on a single host. Okay, so this is about the Docker Compose. Let me try to read out the features of the Docker Compose. So the application services are configured using YML files. Okay, so we need to create one YML file for the Docker Compose, and maybe you wonder what is Docker Compose main benefit? Most certainly the fact that it allows users to run commands on several containers at the same time. So this is the main feature of the Docker Compose. We have created multiple containers, and on the multiple containers we can run the command at the same times. So with the help of the Docker Compose we can do that. This means that the developers can write a YML configuration file for their application service and subsequently use just one command to start it. So I will show you everything about the Docker Compose, how you can try to create your Docker Compose file, how you can create a container of the application, create the container of the database, and how you can communicate between them. So everything I will show you. So let's get it started. Let me go to the IntelliJ and try to create one application, and then I will try to show you how we can carry out our work. So let me try to create one Spring Boot Mongo Docker Compose file. Okay, so let me go next. This is the web application, so we need to include the Spring Web as well as I'm using Lombok, and the database that we are going to use is MongoDB. So Spring Data MongoDB that we are going to use. So let me go next, create this and then new tab. It will take few seconds to configure itself to download all the starter dependency that we have added. So once it is done with the configuration, then what we can do, we can start with the developing our applications. So yeah, let me go to the source and then see if it is configured or not. Yeah, it is configured. Let me try to quickly create couple of packages. So let's say it's entity. Okay, repo. I'm not going to create the service class. I'm directly going to call the uh, MongoDB provided methods inside the controller. So I'm going to create the controller. Let's say it's a package controller. Okay, so let me try to create the entity called student. Okay, add it. Or let me try to create the entity called product. So let me refactor this. Let's say it's a product. Okay, let me try to create the instance of the product. So let's say private int teaser ID, product name and quantity, private string name. Okay, and then private string quantity. So I'm going to create this quantity as a integer. Okay, so this is what the This is all the instance variables that we have created. Now let me try to use this as a ID. Okay, and let me try to create the getter and setters and all argument and no argument constructors for this. And let me try to create the collection for this class. So collection, and name of the collection should be product. Okay, so we are done with the configuration and creation of our entity class. Now let me go to the repo and create a product repo here. So it is product repo. Let me try to extend it with the Mongo repository. Mongo repository. Here we need to pass these two arguments. First is the entity name, which is product, and ID of the entity. So it is integer type. And let me try to come here and create the product controller. Okay, so this is the controller class. So let me try to annotate this with the REST controller as well as request mapping. So it is request mapping. Let me do some mapping here. So let's say it is API, or let's say it's product, something like that. Okay, now what we need to do, I'm going to create a get mapping as well as the put mapping, sorry, post mapping. So let's say the method for this is uh, public, and the return type should be of product type, product. Okay, and let's say it's a get product, something like that, get product. Okay, now let me try to import this class here. Okay, and let me try to provide some mapping here. Let's say product. Okay, or find all. So it will return the list of the product from the database. Okay, so here let me try to create a list. Okay, so it will return the list of products. So let's say it's a list of product. Okay, and so here we need to call the Mongo repository provided method. So with the help of that, we can find out all the product from the database. So for that, I'm going to auto-wire the product repository here. So let's say auto-wire private product repo, product repo. Okay, let me remove this space. Let me add some space here. So uh, let me try to call the product repo here and then find all method from the Mongo repository, and then simply return it. So it will find out all the product from the database and it will return from here. Now let me try to create one post mapping. So let's say it's a post mapping, and the mapping I'm providing here is insert, and we are inserting one product here, and return type of this method is product only. So let's say insert product. Okay, here we need to pass the product as a request body product. Okay, product, and we need to call the Mongo repository provided method, which is save, to save the entry into the database. So and pass the reference of product here and then simply return it. So these two mappings I have created for now. Now what I am going to do, I am just going to do the configuration for the database connectivity here. So for that, what I need to do, I need to create one application.yml file, and there I will try to do the configuration. Okay, so let me try to create one application.yml file. So it is application.yml. Okay, so it is a Spring Mongo Spring data MongoDB, I think, yeah, Spring data dot MongoDB. We need to provide the database host and the port name. So let's say database is product and host. I'm going to provide localhost, but uh, when we are going to create the container for the MongoDB database, then we need to change this host name. We need to provide the host name on which the container is active, the MongoDB container is active. So we need to provide that host name here. For now, I'm just keeping as a local host. So let is the port is the default port for the MongoDB, which is 27017. So we are done with the configuration. We need to change this host name. Okay, so now let me try to build these applications to create the jar file of it. So before that, I'm going to write the Docker file. Okay, so let me try to create a Docker file here. So let me try to create a Docker file, new, and then file, Docker file. You need to keep the Docker file name like this only. D should be capital, and then after that, everything should be small. Okay, so here we need to do some configuration. So we need to include the OpenJDK. So for that, we need to do from OpenJDK, and I'm using the version 17. Now we need to create the jar file. So for that, we need to provide the space or the location where the jar file will be created and the jar file name, and then the entry should be created. So let's say it's add and target. Inside target folder, we are going to create the jar file. So let's say target slash. We need to provide the jar file name. So let's say I'm going to name this like Spring Boot Docker, and then we need to provide Docker Compose or Spring Boot Docker Compose, something like that. Compose. Okay, dot jar. So this is this location where it will be generated. Provide the jar name here, and the entry point should be it should be Java minus jar, and then we need to provide the jar file name. So let me copy this and then paste it out here. Okay, let me remove this space. So we are done with the configuration of the Docker file. Now let me try to go to the application pom.xml file, and let me try to write one configuration here, which is final name, and let me try to give the name of the jar file should be where is that Docker file. Let's say the jar file name is Spring Boot Docker Compose. Okay, so come to the pom.xml, paste it out here. Okay, so we are done with the configuration of the Docker file application.yml file, and now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create the Docker image of this application, as well as I'm just going to create the or pull the Docker image of the MongoDB database that we are going to use. So the images for both of the application MongoDB as well as the Spring Boot application that we have created should be ready. And after that, we need to create the Docker Compose file where we'll try to automatically create the container for both of them and try to get a link between them. So we'll do that after this. So now let me try to build this application. So go to the Maven and then go and use the Maven install. So it will create the Docker image. It will create the jar file inside the target folder. So here some target folder will be generated, and inside that the jar file will be created. Okay, and where this application is, so it is inside project. So you can see one target folder is created here. Now let me go inside this, and you can see our jar file is ready. So now let me go to the application location. So let me go here, go to the project, and inside the project, okay, let me come out of it. Here inside this project, and here you can see we have created this project here. So you need to open the folder structure where your Docker file is there, and you need to open a command prompt here. Okay, so let me try to increase the size of the command prompt. Let's say 28. Okay, let me close this and open it again. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to create a Docker image of our application. So before that, I'm just trying to show you what all the images I have. So command is docker images, docker images. So you can see I have all these images in my local. So it is Spring Boot, MySQL, Docker, Mongo app, and everything is there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one Docker image of our application. So for that, the command is docker build -t, and then we need to provide the image name. So let's say it's Spring Docker Compose, Spring Boot Docker Compose, or something like that. Spring Docker Compose, Spring Docker Compose. Okay, so this is the image name that I'm going to provide, and then space, and then we need to provide the root here, and then enter. So it will create one image with the name Spring Docker Compose. So let me try to run the command docker images again to show you if it is created or not. So you can see here Spring Docker Compose is created, which is 7 seconds ago. So now we are done with the creation of our Docker image of our Spring Boot application. What I need to do, I need to pull the MongoDB image. So I already have the MongoDB image locally. So if you don't have, you need to run the command docker pull mongo, okay, and then enter. So it will take out the latest MongoDB image from the Docker hub. So you can see uh, it has pulled the Docker image of MongoDB. So we have the Docker image of our application, we have the Docker image of our database. Now what I need to do, I need to create one container uh, of the MongoDB database and of the Docker Compose application that we have created. So we need to create the container of both of them, database as well as the application. So I'm not going to create those things by the Docker commands. I'm directly going to create the Docker Compose file, and then there will try to do the configuration that it automatically create itself, and then it will pick up. So let me go there to the application, and then let me try to create the Docker Compose file. So let's say, let me minimize this. So let me go to the resource, and then let me try to create. So here also, or anywhere you can create in the folder structure. Okay, so let's say the file name is docker compose .yml, add it. Now here we need to do some configuration. Let's say I'm going to use the version as 5, and we need to create the services here. So let's say services. So inside the services, we need to create the containers. So one container I'm going to create for the MongoDB, and the another is I'm going to create for the application that we have created. So let's say I'm going to name the container for the MongoDB as EnggAdda. So let's say it's EnggAdda. Okay, and images of that container is Mongo, which is already there locally in our system. So let it test. The version I'm going to use is latest one. Now we need to provide the container name, which is EnggAdda. Okay, and the port for that. So default port for the MongoDB is 27017. So 27017, and this is where the first port number is to expose to the entire world, and this is the internal one. So it is 27017. I'm keeping both of the port as same. Now let me try to copy this and then try to create the container for the our application as well. So here let me paste it out and let me change the name. So the container name for this application should be the application, the Docker image name that we have created. So let me go here, Docker images. Okay, let me try to copy this and then let me try to come here and then paste it out. And image name is this only, and the container name should be the same one. So, and the port number that I'm going to make our application up is 90902 for the entire world, and the default port I'm going to use here for our application as an internal one. So we are done with the configuration of our Docker Compose file. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to link both of the containers. So for that, we need to have one configuration as link, and we need to provide the container name of our MongoDB container. So let's say it's engineering adda. So we are linking the application with the engineering adda. So we are done with the configuration of Docker Compose file. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to make this Docker Compose up. So let me try to summarize everything that we have done so far. So we have created the Docker image of our application. We have created the Docker image of our MongoDB, which we pulled from the Docker hub, and we have created this Docker Compose file where we created the container for our image, MongoDB image as well as the application image, and then we linked both of them. So let me try. One thing we forgot is we forgot to change the host name in our application.yml file. We need to provide the host name as the engineering adda, which is the container for our MongoDB. So let me copy this and then let me go to the application.yml file and then change this to the engineering adda. So now we are done, and then what I need to do, I need to do the Maven build again. So we need to build the jar file again, and then we need to create the image of our application again because we are changing this configuration now. So let me come here, let me try to do Maven install. So once our jar file is created, we need to create our image again. So let me try to remove that image first. So let me go to the Docker hub, sorry, Docker desktop, and then go to the Docker image. Here you can see I have created this image, Spring Docker Compose. Let me select this, and from here you can directly, okay. So you can see it is deleted. So we don't have the image for our Spring Boot application. So you can see the build is success now. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create the Docker image again. So let me go to the terminal, and here what I have did, I already have run this command, I think. So this is the image name. Okay. And this is the command. So let me try to run it again so that we can create our Docker image. And so our Docker image should be created. Let me go to the Docker images. Okay, so you can see our Docker image is created 8 seconds ago. So we have created the image of our application. We have the image for the MongoDB, and we are good with the configuration as well. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to open up the Docker Compose. So we have the command Docker Compose up to make the Docker Compose application up and running. And from there, it will automatically create the Docker container for both of them, and then it will link it, and from there it will make our application up as well. So I will try to hit the API after that. So where is the Docker Compose? It is inside the resource folder. So I need to open a terminal there. So let me go to this location and open up a command prompt. And the command to make the Docker Compose up is docker compose and up. So it will, so you can see it has created the container for both of them. Okay, and then it will link both of them, and then it will make the Spring Boot application up. So let me maximize this. So it is doing those things. So you can see this application is up on the port number 8080. But For the external word, we have configured our port as 9090, so I'm going to use that. So let me go to the Postman, and this is the API that we have developed to insert, and these are the request. So ID, name, and the quantity. So I'm making ID as 101, name is mobile, and quantity is 1, and we are just trying to insert something there. So let's say insert. So you can see, okay, the quantity is a string or what? Let me try to see. Go to this, go to the product. It is integer only. Then why it is not taking up? Okay, let me put a space. Let me try to send it again. Not a problem. It is QTY. Let me try to insert it. So you can see it is inserted. Now what I'm going to, so we are able to hit the API. Okay, our application is up and running. Very good. We are able to hit the API. We are able to insert some record into the database. So what I'm going to show you, I'm just going to open up the Studio 3D, and I'm just going to connect with the running instance of the MongoDB, which is running locally. So let me go to the Docker desktop, and let me go to the container, and then inside the resource you can see we have this EnggAdda as and the Spring Docker Compose. Both containers are up and running. Let me go to the EnggAdda. Okay, and this is the container for our MongoDB. Let me go to the inspect, and here you can see, uh, let me go down. Let me go. Yeah, here you can see this is up on the port number 27017, and this is the host for this. So let me copy this, and let me open the Studio 3D. Studio 3D. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect the Studio 3D with the running instance of our MongoDB, which is running in the Docker. So let the Studio 3D up. Once it is up, then I will try to connect. So it is up now. Let me try to create a new connection. Manual configure my connection setting. Next, if you don't know how you can install and connect the Studio 3D with the MongoDB, I already have the videos on my channel. You can watch it out. So let's say I'm going to name this connection as a Docker Compose. Okay, and the server is. Uh, Let me come to the Docker desktop. Let me copy this again. So it is 0.0.0.0. So let me copy this. Come here, paste it out. Okay, let me try to type it manually. So we are done now. Let me try to test the connection. So you can see it is connected. Let's say it's okay, and then okay. And let me try to connect it out. So you can see we already have a this database called product, which we have did in the configuration. You can see here in the application.yml file we have created our database as a product. Okay, so that is why it is created one database called product, and inside that one collection with the product is also created, because here in the entity we have configured the collection as a product. So let me go and then show you. So you can come to the entity, and here you can see we have configured our collection as a product. So product database and the product collection is created inside the MongoDB. So you can see this, and we have inserted one record there, right? So that record will also be there. So let me try to open this up. So you can see we have one record here uh, with ID 1, name is mobile, and the quantity is 1. So we are good with the configuration. We are good with the connection of the Studio 3D with the running instance of the MongoDB. We are able to hit the APIs, and we are able to insert something into the database. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit the second API, which is a get API. So before that, let me try to insert some more records here. So let's say the ID is 102, and The name of the product is laptop and the quantity is one. I'm just keeping now, and let me try to send it out. So you can see it is inserted. Now let me go to the Studio 3D and then let me try to show you. You can see the second item is also inserted here. Second product is also inserted. So we are good. Now let me try to hit the get mapping, which is find all. So find all, and then let me change this method type to get and then hit it. So you can see we are able to fetch out all the record from the database. So we are good with the creation of everything that we covered in this video. So you can see like how the Docker Compose is working, how we can create the Docker container using the Docker Compose. Okay, so everything is working fine. So this is about this video. If you like the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe the channel for more such content.